Well, if you're trying to access Mac machine from a Windows machine, you might have used VNC or something. So that's so sluggish. When you scroll down, the refresh rate is not good. Everything turns out to be really slow. In this video, we are going to talk about an open source tool called RustDesk and how it's kind of seamlessly integrates with whatever platform that you are on just by using Docker and whatnot. Is it real good for gaming? No, that's not the case, but you can survive with, remotely accessing your device that you might be running on at your home, from your work or like somewhere else. Without any further ado, let's get started. RustDesk is an open source application with a copyleft license written in Rust. Let's download RustDesk and install them in our Mac. It's gonna ask if you can trust this application. Click OK and then move on. So once that's done, you need to configure it with the screen recording permission so that it can record the screen and share. And then you will also have to reopen it to configure the accessibility permission. Type in the password and then you are all set. We will see an ID. This is what we are going to use in our Windows machine to connect to this Mac. Straightforward, isn't it? In case if you want to start the service right from the beginning, like when you boot up the machine, so that you can access it from a remote desktop or like a remote machine, enable this and install this. For now, I will skip it. Now that we have installed it in the Mac, we will repeat the same process to have it installed in the Windows. Firstly, we'll download it and then we will hit the install to install it. Give it a couple minutes. So once we have it, so we will have to type in the number that we got from the previous Mac machine and then we'll hit connect. And then we will have to enter the one-time password right now that is displayed on the Mac machine. And hit OK. So everything is connected right now. So you can see that like we are able to access our Mac machine from the Windows machine. What happens behind the scene is the Mac machine is gonna connect to the ID server that's running in the public internet, and the Windows machine will try to connect to the ID server in the public internet hosted by RustDesk, allowing both the machines to be registered and made available for discovery in the public internet. Once they are discovered, they are allowed to connect with each other directly. Now in few cases, there might be an ask wherein with respect to a strict firewall or NAT configuration, one of the server might not directly talk to the other, in which case they also provide something like a relay server wherein the first server will expose itself to the relay server and the relay server will transmit the data down back to the second server. If you are worried about exposing these machine information to the ID server or even to the relay server in case if you want to transmit that way, you might consider running the ID server in your local machine. Fortunately enough, they have the Docker Compose file for this, so we can run it on our Docker machine. If you aren't familiar with Docker, Docker is nothing but like a ship wherein it contains multiple containers. So you can offload and onload like a lot of containers in it. So we have the ID server and the relay server. We need to run these servers somewhere. Either you need to run it in your host machine or you can have an opportunity to have it run as a Docker container. So the Docker container is going to be easier, and then if you want to take it down, it's easier to take it down as well. And it is cross-platform compatible. So whether you run it on Mac, Linux or Windows, it's going to be the same Docker desktop that you need to have. First thing first, you need to have the Docker desktop installed. Assuming that you have installed Docker desktop in your machine, either on a Mac or on a Windows or on your NAS. In this case, we will create a folder called RustDesk, and within the folder, we will have to open the terminal. So in the terminal, we will do touch docker compose.yaml to create the Docker Compose file so that we could copy the Docker Compose YAML in here and save them. Once we have it saved, we can now run Docker Compose up-d. Here D is the flag for detached. If you notice here, I am getting an error. That's because I do not have the Docker desktop running. Once I have it started, it should be up and running. Now if I issue the same command, it should ask me permission to create the directory within it. What's happening now is it's trying to pull required images from the repository, and then it's making sure both of the HBBR and HBBS is running, which is the ID and the relay server. Now that we are able to successfully run the ID server and the relay server in the Mac Docker container, we haven't connected these Mac client and the Windows client to these ID and relay servers, isn't it? They are still pointing to the public RustDesk ID server, right? Now we have to remap it to point to the servers that are running on our Docker container. That's what we are gonna do next. After running Docker Compose up, if you have noticed, it has created the data volume, so which is the data folder. If you closely look at the YAML file, so you have specified the volume to the data folder. This is where the internal data of those servers are stored. If you notice here, within this folder, you will have a public key. Our clients will need this public key to successfully talk to the ID servers running in local Docker container. So we will have to configure that on our clients. Before jumping on and configuring it in the client machines, I would like to make a slight change. In this case, the Mac is running on 137 and the Windows is running on 14. In which case, like the Docker is also running on 137. If at all, if these clients needs to point, it would need to point to 137. Say Mac is need to point to 137 and the Windows needs to point to 137. I would like to make a slight change in this scenario. Rather than using the Docker container on Mac, I would like to introduce it into my NAS system. That way, I can use 137, that's my Mac, and 14, that's my Windows, and I can use 4 where the NAS can run the ID server and the relay server. So in this case, instead of running it on my Windows or Mac, I will run this on my NAS. That way it is always running, and if at some point in time, if I want one of my machines to be started, I can always rely on NAS that it will be always up and running all the time. So I'm copy pasting the Docker file in here and then I will click deploy. What actually happens is it will try to pull all the images from the Docker Hub repository and then it will instantiate those two containers. One is the relay server and the other one is ID server. Now let's do the task of configuring the clients to point to the NAS. We also need the public key that got generated. So that will be the data folder. I'm copying that as well. Firstly, I will put in this information by going into the network settings and then unlocking it and clicking on ID server. Here I will put the ID server's IP address. In this case, I'm using my NAS. In case if I had used the Mac ID server, I would have pasted 137. But ideally in this case, I'm using my NAS as an ID server. So I'm using .4. Once that's done, you will see that it's ready in here. I will do the same step in my Mac machine. And then I will paste in the public key down in here. I will put in the ID server that's running on my NAS. And then I will also make sure this is ready. Now if we repeat the same steps, we could make sure like that's getting connected again. In this case, we are not using the public RustDesk ID server. Rather, we are using our local ID server. In this case, we have used our local network to demonstrate it. However, it should work okay even though the source and the destination machine are in a different network, provided they are able to access the ID server since we are using ID to connect here. If at all, if you know the IP address of the machine that you are trying to access, then you can directly use the IP address. That's another way to connect. In this case, it's not going to use the ID server at all. It's directly going to talk to the source machine. To do that, you would need to allow direct IP access in the settings menu. Once that's done, I'm just copying the Mac IP address into my Windows machine and hitting on connect. This way it directly connects to my Mac from Windows using the IP address. Let's say if you are trying to access your Mac machine which is at your home using your Windows machine which is in a remote location which does not have access to your LAN. Then you can use something called as Tailscale. Once you have Tailscale installed on all your devices, then all your devices will be visible to each other in the Tailscale network, which will technically act like a local network within your Tailscale network. And then you can just use the Tailscale IP address of the respective devices and then can connect with each other. In this case, the ID server, as I mentioned, isn't required, so I'm gonna turn off this for this demonstration. I'm doing this in the NAS. In case if you are using Windows or Mac, you will have to do docker compose down on the terminal to do the same. Once the ID server is turned off, you could see that it's not connected and it's turned off. I'm gonna copy the Tailscale IP address, and then this is going to be a public IP address. So I'm just gonna copy it from my other machine wherein I have Tailscale installed, and then if I try to connect to it, and voila, there you go. I see using Tailscale with RustDesk to be super efficient, since you do not have to worry about configuring the ID server or having it run in, and also unnecessary need for the UDP hole punch-in. And if you are running it in local, then you wouldn't even need Tailscale. You can just point to the machine's local IP address and then move on, again eliminating the need of unnecessary ID servers. We have come to the end of the video. I hope this video was informative. If you have any questions, please post in the comments box below. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.